Hey, good people, Davia here, and welcome to Tales from the Shaker, a Davia Williams Stevenson podcast. This is episode 1, y'all. I'm so excited. And I'm really thrilled to have as my first guest here, Rich and Shalla Johnson. Cool people over here. We were just talking before. I didn't realize I've known them almost 20 years. I know you're thinking, how do any of you know anybody for 20 years? Because we just look so fabulous.
Hello.
Right? Yeah. But they're really cool people. And today's episode is entitled, Marriage Tings. They are celebrating their 20th anniversary.
Absolutely.
Just yesterday, I think.
Yes.
And so I'm very excited to talk about just what got you here. How are you still here 20 years later, celebrating 20 years and looking forward to 20 more years? So let me tell you a little bit about them. Rich and Shalla, Rich pastors Sanctuary Church in Columbus. Now let me ask you this. Are both of you pastors? Are Rich and Shalla pastors of Sanctuary Church? Or is Rich pastor? And are you first lady? What do you like? I like first lady, but tell me how you like to...
How do you like
that?
Defined and described?
You know, for a long time after starting Sanctuary, I had babies at home. And so I did not want to have the responsibility of really anything other than supporting Rich and being there for our kids. And so I definitely was not a pastor or co-pastoring, and still would say that I'm not. As we grow and as I grow into the role of First Lady, I am feeling more and more comfortable, but it's definitely more of a just kind of a, I'm
evolving.
Evolving.
Is evolving.
Thank you. Yes.
And Sanctuary is a multiracial congregation.
Right.
And so the way that pastors and their wives were identified in the Black church that we grew up in, the pastor's wife, in the case where it's led by a male, his wife was a First Lady, and you addressed her as First Lady. Now, when we started attending white churches and got into white evangelicalism, that was just the pastor's wife, period. And I think there was a certain kind of honor and respect in the Black church that I appreciated for First Lady. So for the first 8 years or so of Sanctuary, Shalla was Shalla, but in these last 2 years, I will even address her as my First Lady and the church as well, so that she receives that honor and respect.
Yes, quite a sacrifice and definitely a partnership. Well, in this partnership, they have 4 children.
Hello.
16 to 11.
Yes.
Amazing. 3 boys and 1 little girl, and she's the youngest.
That's right.
Yeah, so wow, what a life she probably has. Either it's really free or it's really oppressed because these brothers are making sure nobody, messes with little sister. But I think Cora's quite a little fireball in her own right.
She is.
Yeah. And so, as they mentioned, Rich pastors a multiracial church in Columbus where are you located now? You're in the Linden area still?
Well, it is called Northland, so
Northland
it's
area.
just outside of Easton, right off of Morris Road and Route 3.
Okay, very cool. Been doing that for 10 years. You're the founding pastor.
10 years, founding pastor.
Yeah.
We.
Yeah, you did it.
We did it. We
Still
did
doing it.
And still doing
That's
it.
all right.
Yeah,
It's still growing and
it
still
really
evolving.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And those early years, as Shalla said, Cora was just a baby when we started. And so many Sundays, she was getting the 4 kids together on her own and bringing them to church, because I was getting there a little bit earlier and a little bit sooner. And so that sacrifice in getting the church started was made in huge respect, by Shalla. To do that. A lot of families don't have to go through that when they're attending church together or events together. We have to drive separately because I'm generally there earlier or a little bit later. And so I'm really grateful for all of that sacrifice that she's made for our family.
Yeah. When you think about taking on a new venture in general in marriage, and you guys have a couple of things going on even currently, I'd love to touch on at some point. How you maintain your sense of family, your couplehood, then there's the mission, and in your case, your venture is caretaking, spiritual welfare of a congregation, a multiracial congregation coming from different backgrounds, different how do you hold it together? And when you don't, what's that look like? But let's start with how you hold it together. Do you feel all of those levels all the time?
There's seasons of intensity.
Okay.
This past year with the pandemic was an intense season.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think what helps me personally, and I think hopefully helps our family, is a rhythm that we can depend on. So a rhythm of having dinners together as a family and making that a priority. And everything is shut out. There's no interruptions for our family time. We have family meetings together where we're going to talk about the good and the bad and the in between. And so those guarded times for our family really help to set the rhythm for everything else, for leading the church, for new business ventures, and things of that nature. What do you think?
Yeah, I think creating stability in our home is very important. And as Rich mentioned, no matter what's going on, we have dinner as a family at least 5 nights a week, which, with older teenagers, that can sometimes be really hard to do. But it is a priority because really sometimes that is the only time we can have a true conversation with our kids, when we sit down for that quick meal. And not to say, Rich will still jump on the phone, later on that evening, but there is a guarded time for dinner, which is really important. And I'm really thankful that he's sacrificed that time as well.
Yeah. So there's a theme. I keep hearing sacrifice in service to the mission, which is keeping your family together, keeping your marriage together, and pastoring this church together. Sometimes when we think of the word sacrifice, it feels like drudgery. I got to give up, the thing that's.
Yeah.
I don't get that vibe from you guys. That is no. This is a place where I can serve. I can give up this thing for the mission that's bigger. I think that's a big value or approach to success in marriage. I've too been married a long time, and I'm happy to be married a long time and looking forward to next. Yeah. We'll be 35 this year, which I can't believe.
Wow.
Congrats.
Yeah, my husband and I have been together our entire adult lives since we were 18 years old, freshmen in college.
Oh my goodness.
So talk about some phases and some changes, and we are not those same people.
Yes.
Right? And in marriage, you have all of this. Each child brings another layer, another personality, changes the dynamic. Yeah. So in 20 years, 4 children, a couple of moves, right? What makes you look forward to the next 20? How are you sitting here looking like you're smiling and you're touching? And I know this to be real.
I can speak to that a little bit. So we celebrated 20 years. Our official anniversary was just yesterday, and we went to dinner last night. And on the way home, Rich said, we should play our song, our wedding song. And so we did. And it was raining last night, and I just started crying. And I told Rich that I truly was just really so happy and thankful for where we are now. And I think because some of the sacrifices that we have made in the past have brought us to where we are now. Truly, truly a happy marriage and relationship that we have. And, I love him more now, and I know him more now than I did 20 years ago. And you're right, we do change. We go through seasons, and we are not the same people that we were 20 years ago. But I am grateful for the people that we are now. And so, yeah, it was good.
I love that for you. I love that for your children. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that the love I have for Shalla is what compels me to make those joyful sacrifices. And I grow in the depth of my love for her the longer we are together, and the hardships that we navigate together, both interpersonally as well as those hardships that are external, that are beyond our control. And it's growing in that depth of love that it actually compels me to have greater love for the whole world just by learning to love this one person and receive love, from this one person. Gives me a greater capacity to love, others in my congregation, out in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Isn't that something? Because when you think about what marriage is, 2 people from two different cultures, so to speak, coming together, promising to love one another exclusively forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
a crazy thing for
Right.
people, but it's the most beautiful thing. It is a most necessary thing for a stable society. But I think all of your people skills get worked out,
Hello.
or lack of skill get exposed.
Yes.
All of it.
Yes.
All of it.
Yes.
In marriage. So I'm going to ask you a tough question then. We talked about mutual sacrifice, so that's certainly one of your values. Joyful mutual sacrifice, which I thought was really neat. What other skills do you think have you employed that you've learned that have been building for your marriage?
I mean, how we discovered early on that we both handle conflict the same, although it kind of works itself out differently. So we were friends before we started dating, and throughout our courtship, we never had one disagreement with one another.
Wow.
Not one. I mean,
Not-
like
yeah,
it was
not a single one.
not a single one, not a single argument or anything.
Which we would not recommend.
We would-
It's
Yeah,
not
because
healthy.
I'm thinking, okay,
recommend
my
y'all
therapist
get in
had
some
is
fight.
like,
Yeah, we recognize that. Later.
But we got home from the honeymoon and had our first disagreement. And
Boy, did that feel like a bait and switch? I'm
oh
thinking.
wow,
Yeah.
but we didn't even know we were in it in that moment, and took
okay.
years for us to understand that the way I handle conflict is I just sit with it and internally begin to withdraw, and that's not healthy either. And the way she handles conflict is also to withdraw, but more physically, be distant, right? And so here we are. We could have this distance between us for days early on in our marriage. Just
Still
like,
function.
Still function,
Yeah.
right? We got things to do. But like, the tension is there and no one is naming it. Over the years, I think we've just got better at simply naming what the tension is.
Good.
Just say it. Hey, I don't feel good. I'm upset. I'm angry. Something you said, disrupted me. I'm not sure why you did this, or etc. Right? We got better at naming the tension.
Sure. Yeah. And talking through those moments when you're not angry with each other. So how should we in the future handle when we are in a disagreement, or when
You
I
don't
don't
put something
feel
on the
right,
Oh, Shalla's real organized like that.
schedule.
Okay.
No, he is
Oh,
really, he's telling on
okay.
himself. So yeah, but absolutely naming it. Yeah, for sure.
That's critical.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always say that you can't deal with something you can't identify. But many of us don't, like I say, don't know how to identify. Certainly said before, and we've interacted on a professional level. You've referred people to me as a counselor. And so it's a space that I operate in. And I always tell people, so when you were first saying that we didn't fight at all, I thought, oh, but how are you close? Because there has to be conflict if you're bringing yourself. There doesn't have to be combat,
Right.
but there has to be conflict. And to be able to see that as useful in revealing yourself to one another and becoming more of a unit.
Well, in my family of origin, I never saw my parents handle a disagreement. That was always dealt with in private. Yeah. And so I never saw it. And in fact, when I did see some tense moments, my mind and imagination went to the worst. Oh, they're about to get a divorce. Oh, this going down. And I would actually felt that same kind of tension, like, oh, we just had our biggest fight ever. We probably not going to be married. What's going down? We're headed for divorce.
Yeah. And after the fact, we would talk about it and he would say that. And I would respond shocked. Like, what? What do you mean? Like, no, like that's never happening, or like that's extreme.
Right.
Let's talk about this in between phase where we can really grow towards something better and the good can come out of that, that bad. Yeah. And some of our greatest growth moments have come through counseling and us making a decision, when we were not in a good spot and kind of a space where we felt like, okay, we need help to get through the next level or get through whatever this is right now.
Yeah.
And so being very open to that.
I fully believe in it. We've been to counseling a number of times in our marriage, and it's always been beneficial, both as individuals and as a couple as well. So I hope that becomes more normalized.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it's
Particularly for our community.
particularly for our community, referring to the Black community. Um, we think you have to be crazy or something drastic to get some help. And I see counseling as a trained person who can empathize with your story, but can take the bird's eye view, and help you navigate your path to something else, whether it's better communication skills, or as you two realize that we actually handle conflict the same. It just looks like it's different, but we're both avoiders in some way. Yeah, very, very good. I love that. Rich, we had a conversation earlier talking about marriage, and we talked about some resources that are common Christian resources in marriage.
Yes.
And we had a difference of opinion on a couple of them. One of the things you brought up was that you thought there was just sort of a patriarchal, I don't know if you would say white patriarchal for you. I don't know. I don't know if you gave me those words or not. I may be assuming on some of these resources. We won't call them out because there's still benefit and they're still helping some people.
Right.
But can you say some more about your view? What do you mean by patriarchy, a patriarchal view? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I think the patriarchy is not just white patriarchy. When you look at the globe and how male and female relationships, men and women relationships operate, there is a patriarchal system that is universal. It transcends race, ethnicity, and color. In the way in which the arrangement, say, a marriage, were to work, is that it completely defers to the man. And in a patriarchal view, it will focus on that Ephesians 5 verse, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, and completely neglect the fact that the verse before it says to be mutually submissive to one another. Now submit yourselves to one another. That's not patriarchy. That is a leveling and an equity in how the husband and wife are to relate to one another, to be mutually submissive. And I find like some of these resources that are most often, recommended lean towards that patriarchal system and the way of relating between a husband and a wife. The husband's supposed to work out of the home, and the wife delights herself into staying home and keeping home and raising children. And we find like in our roles and how we relate to one another, it really is about what works best for you and your spouse, number one. And then secondly, or undergirding that is that mutual submission to one another. And so, yes, Shalla spent a lot of years caring for 4 children and our home, because that helped even that rhythm and that balance for our family, and helped us to maintain a healthy rhythm and a healthy balance. But she's extremely gifted as well outside of the home and want to see her flourish in that gifting outside of the home as a interior designer and entrepreneur. So happy to celebrate that. But, patriarchy will not celebrate that. In fact, it will say, listen, it's my needs first and then yours. Whereas to be mutually submissive to one another is to celebrate each other.
I like that. So I'm digesting. So patriarchy isn't just the structure of, well, we called it headship versus kind of egalitarian is what I think about, but it's more the attitude that goes with it. Me first, I lead, you follow. My needs first, yours second, and that you're referring to that part of it, not so much headship, because there are scriptures that talk about the man being the head of the wife. What does that mean in this? What does that look like if patriarchy is not what's promoted?
Right. What headship looks like for me and for us in our home is that we are sharing what it is to make this body function. So if I have we all have heads and we all have brains, but the brain doesn't contain the hands, doesn't contain the arms, the feet, the legs, but it helps to hold all those things together. And so I feel like my role as the husband in this marriage and the father in this family is really to seek ways that bring us all together and to honor and respect every member in our family, the boys, our daughter, Shalla, my wife, myself included.
And I would imagine you have a similar um, mission. And he said what he felt his role was as the husband, the father in the marriage. What would you say for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think too, is that we share roles and responsibilities. And so, as, Rich is head of household per se, but he does the dishes, our boys clean the bathrooms, we don't have that typical, boys are doing the lawn and that's it, taking out the trash. Cora takes out the trash. And so, I think working together as a whole unit and everybody sharing responsibilities. Our boys being allowed to be emotional
I love
and loving and caring. We're a very physical family, and so we love to watch Friday night movies, all cuddled up on the couch together. And so just breaking down some of those roles and responsibility kind of levels that sometimes are, just pushed so much gender wise, I would say.
Yeah. One thing you said earlier that I loved, you talked about having family meetings. And I could just, my sense in hearing that was that you're giving each of your kids voice. They have, it's a family meeting, so the family gets to meet and share something. I don't know what types of things spur family meetings, if it's a regular thing or it's we got a thing to deal with, let's talk about it as a family. Probably all of the above, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very good. So that's how I hear you working through um, making sure everyone is valued. And you said it also affected how you pastor your congregation, how you parent. Can you say a little bit more about that in the congregation space? How, as your views have developed, maybe, let's say, in that patriarchy space, what does that look like in your church?
Well, I think the way it's evolved is that I've become more vocal about it. So, for example, Sanctuary has always held a view that women are equal to men in ministry gifting and in role and responsibility. So, not just that, oh, women, can preach just like, men can preach, but no, you can actually hold the role and the responsibility and the title, of leader. Our board chair is a woman, and we have women who regularly preach, who also lead and make decisions, in the church and for the congregation. And we've celebrated that from the beginning, of Sanctuary Columbus. But I've become more vocal about it, more publicly and, in social media to recognize that. We've ordained a woman as a pastor and sent her on to go pastor another congregation in Ohio, and are constantly looking for ways to raise up and equip and empower women, not just in the church, but to also celebrate that in other areas of industry outside of the church as well. Um, I just feel like we've captured this idea of grace in our Christian faith, but there are so many limitations to where that grace can go. Oh, the grace can go, and the gender is a limitation, race is a limitation, class is a limitation, and the grace of God actually transcends all of those barriers to where we ought to be making room for all of the folks who may be put into categories that don't truly identify them in ways that they can contribute to the whole community.
I just love that. That makes me excited for your children. I'm thinking especially Cora,
Yeah.
for your congregation, for those women who are able to operate in their giftings. I just love that. It makes me very excited. So we were going to talk sometime earlier in the spring about marriage, and you were going to ask me to be your guest on marriage. So I thought, let's take these a couple moments. We're running toward the in here. And is there something you'd like to ask me? I'll put on my therapist hat. That can contribute to the conversation or anything you want to know. And no, it's a fine answer. We can move on to the next thing.
You won't get off that easy. I'm sure we can come up with something.
Do you have any questions for Davia?
I'll think on it a second.
Okay, so I know a question I have is that the pandemic really brought to the surface things that were already underneath, whether it was globally, but particularly in our relationships as well, and in marriages. I don't know how truthful the research, really was, but there was an increase in separations and divorces during the pandemic because now
partner
couples,
violence for sure,
and domestic abuse, right? Partner violence, those things were on the increase. They were there, already, but they had become more prominent. And my hope is that we've been able to grow in understanding what those issues are so that we can address them. And so I just think, what are some issues that we should, as a couple looking to celebrate, our 40th year, of marriage in the future, that we want to pay, that you would say, I think you guys should really pay attention to this?
I think the things that maintain health, whether it's mental health or physical health, relational health, are not usually sexy. They're usually basic. They're usually very basic. And so as you continue to pay attention to those things you already know about how you communicate, about what's at the root of things, and not, we fight about things. We think we're fighting about things, but we're really fighting for something. We're fighting for recognition, for validation, for purpose, for something. But we get distracted by the noise. And so as much as you can realize, okay, what do I really need here? I say I'm upset about the fact that you didn't handle these particular chores or what have you. And you never do that. You never, be careful of those words, never and always. What is it that I really feel? Do I feel disappointed because? Do I feel neglected? Do I feel taken for granted? So as much as you can understand what the core is beneath, there's always something beneath. And anger is never a primary emotion. It's always sitting on top of something. One of my clients gave me this picture, and I think it's very good, that anger is like the bodyguard for your real emotions. You're not going to get to this fear or this pain or this what have you. I'm gonna brace it. I'm gonna approach you with anger. And so taking a moment to pause. When I talk to couples about, oh gosh, I forgot where I was going. This whole area of fighting for something rather than all the noise. I also say you really don't have, like Jay-Z talks about 99 problems. You really don't have 99 problems. You have 3 or 4 issues. Right. That are your issues, and they're going to be your issues because that's your personality and your upbringing, those things you can't change. But you may find 99 different ways to fight about those 3 or 4 issues. And so pause. If your intention is to be married forever, and you're in a moment where a lot of conflict is verbal, it's withdrawn, whatever it is for you, it's okay to pause and not solve this one right now. You can put a pin in it because guess what? The root isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
The root is rooted in your personality, in your histories, in your what have you. Pause on it. We don't have to fight about this today. Let's pause. Let's go back tomorrow when both of us are rested. Or can we just put a pin in it and go have some fun? Because this is tied to something that matters. What we're fighting about probably doesn't. And so I love practicing the pause. Practicing the pause. It seems to me, if I were your therapist, which I am not and never have been.
For the record.
For the record. I would be, even as your therapist, very excited. You're the type of couple that people come to therapy, couples therapy, for a lot of reasons. Not always to improve their marriage. Sometimes it's to be proven right. See how bad this one is? See, I need somebody to validate that I'm not the bad one, you are. Sometimes it's to hand your spouse off to a mental health professional because you've already made your mind up to exit. A lot of different reasons, because those who come to really work on their marriage already have this concept of mutual sacrifice that you talk about, that I am willing to figure out how to change my mind, and that takes work and intention and time, a lot of pauses, a lot of questions. That's not sexy. That's
Right.
just
Yeah,
basic,
not.
but that's necessary. So I want to toast you guys.
Yes.
We picked out a bottle of champagne.
Oh,
And I'd like
yes.
to get a couple of glasses here and just toast to the next, this 20 into the next 20.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
let me
you so
grab
much.
that. I just want to raise a glass to an incredibly productive and intimacy building 20 years that you two have had, and to 20 more.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, Davia.
Thank you, Davia.
Thank you so much. You gotta sip. Gotta sip after your toast. I'm just so grateful for Rich and Shalla Johnson. Oh, you know, something we didn't mention was we talked about all your, you're gonna have to find a way to get this in there. All of your, how you're supporting one another's ventures. Shalla, Rich mentioned, is an interior designer and has a company called Shalla Michelle
Yes.
That's
Interiors.
Shalla Michelle.
Shalla Michelle.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure folks know about Shalla Michelle.
Oh, well, thank you.
Didn't want to miss that in the midst of raising 4 kids and pastoring a church, that you're also doing your own endeavors. And Rich has also been on an incredible podcast called The Elusive Dream with Dr. Corey Edwards that is just thought-provoking. So I'm really thrilled that you found some time to come over here and do this with me. So thank you very much. So this concludes episode 1 of Tales from the Shaker, a Davia Williams Stevenson podcast. Cheers.
Cheers.
Till next time.